Well, I'm going to stall a little bit for y'all to get in your seats, but at ICR, as you just saw, we're trying to fundamentally change the way you do biology, the way we study biology, the way you think about biology, and put God back into biology. We're also trying to fundamentally change the way you look at the flood by actually looking at data and plotting up. We see that there was a progressive flood. And just like Dr. G did in this first talk, he went back to the, if we went back and studied biology pre-Darwin, we'd actually be better off. Well, in this talk today, we're going to go back and look at the people that studied dinosaurs in the early days. And I think they had it more correct than the current paleontologists out there today. So I've got a chance to dig dinosaurs in Montana, up with Jack Horner and his Montana State crew one week. I dug in Thermopolis, Wyoming a bunch of times, and we dig every year at Dr. G's land over by Devil's Tower, Wyoming. So we're digging up some bones there, Camarasaurus bones, which is a long-necked dinosaur. And Allosaurus, we found at least an Allosaurus tooth on his land. So it's pretty common in the Jurassic Morrison Formation, which is all across the American West. And so you guys even have it here at the Morrisons. I saw it driving in. And it is a pleasure to get out of Texas in the summer. But I didn't realize it was so cold inside the buildings up here as well. But it is nice to get out there every summer. And so we appreciate IBA bringing us in and letting us, co-work with you guys. Mike and Kevin are wonderful, wonderful people. Well, anyway, I'm going to get started. My talk's a little different name than the title than what you might see. I think this is up there now. It's a different title than what's in your program, but it's the same material. But I decided to add a little bit about the extinctions at the end. Because who has heard about the Chicxulub impact crater down in Yucatan? Anybody hear about that? How evolutionary scientists try to claim that dinosaurs went extinct from a meteorite impact that hit the Chicxulub. Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Later in my talk, we'll get to that a little later. First, we're going to start about what is a dinosaur and what's the Bible say. Does the Bible even have the word dinosaur in it, and why? It doesn't, actually. But let's start with some questions. Aren't dinosaurs millions of years old? This is what we're taught. When you watch TV, watch movies, they're always throwing in the millions of years. Even the Jurassic World and Jurassic Park movies will talk about, dinosaurs lived beyond 66 million years ago. They lived 200 some million years ago, whatever. So here is my daughter and I at a St. Clair gas station, I think in South Dakota. We were coming across the Interstate 90, I believe, at the time, going into Badlands. We didn't get to North Dakota that trip. But I used to take college students out to dig dinosaurs in Thermopolis from Michigan, where I was teaching college for about 3 or 4 different times. This is one of our trips, and my daughter would come along with me. But that's what we're taught. And then also, didn't dinosaurs go extinct before humans? And you're always taught that they went extinct millions and millions and millions of years ago, and humans came along in the last million or 2 years. That's the evolutionary story. It's not based on much fact, but that's their story that they teach. And in reality, those of you that grew up like maybe my generation, we grew up on the Flintstones. And the Flintstones are probably the more accurate TV show than compared to Jurassic Park and Jurassic World in some ways, because they showed Dino, the dinosaur, living with humans. And so I just assume those are all post-flood humans living in caves for a while. And that's basically, after the Tower of Babel dispersion. All right. Well, I've stalled long enough. But again, the biggest question I have on here is, will we see those gas prices again? Maybe, maybe not. So, like Trump says, drill. I'm all for it, so let's drill. All right. Well, I do have a talk on oil tomorrow afternoon if you want to hear a little bit about oil and the biblical story of oil and where it came from. And I tie it in back to God's providence. He knew we need that energy today, and he put it in the ground in the flood. And so we'll talk about that tomorrow. But today, dinosaurs. What does the Bible say about dinosaurs? It says dinosaurs and all the land animals were created on day 6. And it says, and God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind. So the word dinosaur is not used, but God doesn't mention every animal in the book of Genesis. He mentions the beasts of the earth. And so dinosaurs were included in the beasts of the earth. Dinosaurs were created to eat plants. Every animal was supposed to just eat plants. There was supposed to be no animal death. And there was no death on the earth until Romans 5:12 tells us, until when? Adam sinned. Adam brought death into the world. And so you can't have millions and millions of years of death and then believe what Romans 5:12 tells us. But if the earth is young, God did create everything just thousands of years ago, it all fits the biblical narrative. So animals, even T-Rex, was designed to eat just plants. Dinosaurs were on the ark. People wonder about that. Well, did God bring dinosaurs on the ark? Maybe that's why they went extinct. Well, that's not the case either, because God did not exclude anything. In Genesis 6:20 and 21, he says, creatures that moved along the ground, 2 of every kind. So God didn't exclude any of the beasts of the earth. He didn't exclude anything that we can tell from the Bible. And in Genesis 7:21 and 23, he goes on to say, everything on land perished, they had the breath of life. So by day 150 of the flood, every air-breathing animal that lived on the earth, walked on the earth, was dead. No exclusions whatsoever. So nothing survived the flood that was a land, air-breathing animal, land-dwelling, air-breathing animal, other than those on the ark that God brought to the ark, 2 of every kind of dinosaur had to be on the ark as well. And then they got off the ark, and they survived for quite some time, as we'll see. Noah's ark was very, very big. This is kind of the minimum size based on the size of the cubit described in the Bible. It's at least 450 feet long, maybe 500 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high with 3 different levels. So God does give us some descriptions of the ark. And it was a very, very large barge is really what I look at it as, a large barge. It probably didn't have a bow on it. Some people like to put a bow on it. Probably didn't need much, just going to move around in the waters and protect everything inside. It was the protection, God's covering for everything inside in the judgment of the flood. And the average dinosaur size was this. Again, we at ICR did this. I like to brag about a little bit of work because we love math. Who doesn't love math? Don't raise your hands because I'm not sure if I asked that right. But I do. As a scientist, I end up taking a lot of math classes. I was in classes with engineers for a while, and I realized, engineering, forget that. I'm sticking with science. Fortunately, Dr. G's not in the room, but June's taking notes. Oh, no. Anyway, it's, scientists and engineers, we like to bicker a little bit, but we all agree. But anyway, we did the math of 350 different dinosaurs. Oh, he's in the room back there. He's waving at me. Anyway, there's 350 dinosaurs we use in a database that came out about 5 or 6 years ago. And we decided, let's do the math. Let's see what the average size was. And this is what we came up with, the size of a bison. That's the average adult size of a dinosaur. But there's only about 60 kinds of dinosaurs. There's 1,000, 1,500 names. Lots of different species, but paleontologists are those people that, if there's a little difference in bone, it's a new species. They would look around the room here and looked at all of our skeletons. X-rays, we would do it through X-rays, not have to kill us all. Through X-rays, and they decided that there's 6 different species of humans in here because there's just a little bit of variation in the skull shape and size and length and height and whether we're bull-legged or not. They'd say, those are different species. That's what they do. And so they split. They split a lot just so they can get another paper published because you've got to find new species to get papers published. But there's really only about 60 kinds, so God only had to bring maybe 120 pairs of dinosaurs onto the ark, and he probably brought juveniles, not full-size animals that could extend from one end of the room to the other. So if you bring on these 5 or 6-year-old dinosaurs, they might have only been, 300 pounds versus 3,000 pounds or even more, or even 30, 40 tons. So again, God knew what he was doing, so I'm assuming that he probably brought smaller ones on the ark. But again, only about 120, maybe 140 if you have 70 kinds. But why is the word dinosaur not in the Bible? And this is why. The word dinosaur wasn't coined or invented until 1841 by this happy-looking guy. He kind of looks like some of you right now. Going, where's my biology talk? Well, Dr. G will be up later again this afternoon. But anyway, this is Sir Richard Owen, and he's the one in 1841 that decided that these are a unique group of reptiles that have holes in their hips, so they walked erect. So they actually have holes in their hips, sockets. Unlike us, we have a socket. They actually had open holes. That's one thing that makes dinosaurs different. Almost all dinosaurs had open holes in their hips, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. So they walked upright. You can see in this view here, this is the way dinosaurs walk. Very leggy animals, and these are the way reptiles today walk. Crocodiles and turtles, they walk sprawling, dragging their bellies kind of in the dirt. So these, when you look at the footprints, we can verify this because we see the dinosaur footprints are very close together. If it's 2-legged or 4-legged, they're not sprawling and out in directions. So you can kind of tell a lizard from a dinosaur. So they're all reptiles, but there's differences, and that's what he defined. So let's look at in the talk, I'm going to go through 4 points, really looking at 4 evolutionary myths that are being spread out there amongst the masses in the movies and the TV shows and in so-called science, the evolutionary science, that dinosaurs had many ancestors. So I was talking about we have a new ancestor to T-Rex, a new ancestor to this. But we'll look at that a little more carefully. Secondly, the dinosaurs evolved into birds. This is really big right now. This is what your grandkids and your kids are learning. The dinosaurs are birds. Some people are saying dinosaurs didn't go extinct, they just evolved into birds. But we'll look at there's a big difference between a bird and a dinosaur. And we'll look at some of these. And I've got a book coming out on that later this year, specifically looking at that topic that my wise and wonderful boss told me to write. And so I learned a lot of things. And so I follow orders as best I can. And so there'll be a book coming out that probably maybe late summer, early fall on that. Some of that's in this talk as well. Third, dinosaurs are supposed to be around 232 million years old. Goes back to the Triassic, they call it, to 66 million years ago, which is the end of the Cretaceous, which is just below what you guys are looking at, rocks around here. So you guys are looking at rocks just above that. So that's kind of where I think is the high point of the flood, is about the end of the Cretaceous, the end of the Zuni mega sequence. Some of you are going, well, I used to know that as 65, right? Who's heard 65 million? Well, that's wrong. Now the evolutionists decided, what's a million year difference? We're going to make it 66. And so what's a million years between you and me? But they kept saying this asteroid hit, there's even a movie, 65, where an asteroid is supposed to hit 65 million years ago. But apparently if they went back 65 million years in time, it would have already hit a million years earlier. So they're not very accurate in their numbers by any means. And finally, we'll look at the idea that dinosaurs went extinct from the asteroid. These are all myths. None of these are true. And we're going to go through these in a little bit of detail. And just as Mike said, the facts are in the rocks. The facts, the evidence for the flood is in the rocks that are still there today. So we can find a lot of evidence to support that these 4 things I just listed are all just myths. The rocks don't lie. The fossils don't lie. People do. And so it's not the rocks, it's not the dinosaurs, people. I've had students in my class come in and say, my parents don't believe dinosaurs ever existed. And I'm like, well, they did, because here's the bones. Here's a few of the bones. So we know they existed, but we got to fit them in. How do they fit in the Bible? How do they fit in the flood? I think that's pretty easy to do, because the rocks don't lie. So we'll look at this first myth that dinosaurs had many ancestors. And then here's a picture of my daughter at the University of Wyoming's little museum down there. If you've ever been down to Laramie, so that's a little plug. But she was on one of my trips to dig dinosaurs when she was younger. She's 33 now. She's a nurse in Colorado Springs. And she's a little older than that. But I use my kids for scale. So you guys have kids, you're using them for scale yesterday on the petrified trees. That's why you have kids. You need some sort of scale because the trees and the fossils all look different sizes. So I'm like, I have to have 2 of them, in case something happens to one of them along the way. So I had a boy and a girl. And mostly my daughter was the one that was interested in digging dinosaurs. So she kind of was the sort of a scientist of the group. And she'll tell you stories about doctors, what they're really like. He didn't even look up. All right, well, we'll keep moving along before I get in trouble. Anyway, this is ceratopsian. Ceratopsian means hornhead, but there's lots of variety of these. There's almost an infinite variety. God loves diversity. And he's got 2 horns, 3 horns, bent horns, straight horns, curved horns this way and that. Well, all these different types of ceratopsians, and most of these are maybe a couple different species at the most. But they're all about the same basic body type. 4 legs, tail, big horns, big frill. But when you look for the ancestors, the rocks, we look at the rocks where they're found in. The rocks, for most of the ceratopsians are found in what's called Cretaceous rocks. Again, those are the last upper level rocks before the dinosaurs disappear in the flood. The earlier ones are Jurassic and Triassic. This is the 3 layers you find dinosaurs in. People call this the Mesozoic, middle life or whatever. That's the evolutionary terms for it. But this is where you find dinosaurs, kind of the upper part of the Triassic through the Jurassic and Cretaceous. But we see different dinosaurs at different levels as they were being buried in the flood. But all the ceratopsians are found up here. And you look down the rocks down here in earlier dinosaur-bearing rocks, and there's nothing. that resembles a four-legged ceratopsian. Nothing like these pictures over here at all. They're only found, boom, they just show up suddenly, fully formed, ready to go. Same thing is true with Tyrannosaurus. Here's T-Rex, Sue in Chicago. You guys have heard about Sue and the whole story about Sue? Well, this is Sue. If you get to university, or if you get to the Field Museum in Chicago, I used to take students over there, teachers that were getting master's credit to, it's about 5-hour drive from where I used to live, in to see Sue, and it's about 90% complete. So we look for ants. I got a chance to dig, as I mentioned, with Jack Horner's crew up in Montana. Here we are digging along the, I think it's the Sun River. Is there a Sun River? Does that sound right? I think that's where we were digging away on a site of a T-Rex. And you can see here's the tooth over here of a Tyrannosaurus. This is a small one. It actually was a Dyspladiosaurus, not a true T-Rex, but it's the same kind of dinosaur. We look for ancestors again. We look back in the rocks of these things, and we see the same problem. They're all found up here in those Cretaceous rocks as well, the upper part before the dinosaurs disappear in the flood. And you look down below, and there's nothing that looks like a T-Rex. Where do they come from? They just show up suddenly. And that's the whole story of the fossil record. Trilobites just show up suddenly, boom, in the Cambrian. With eyes, compound eyes, all these things, they just show up. And those, the eye really baffled Darwin. How do you get these eyes just show up suddenly? But that's the story of everything. And even birds. The reason why paleontologists today are arguing that dinosaurs evolved into birds is because they have no ancestor to birds. They have nothing. So they say, well, maybe dinosaurs did. But we'll see that they're vastly different. Dinosaurs and birds are completely different, as we'll see. David Weisample, who looked at more dinosaurs probably than almost anybody in the world, or at least as many as anybody, at Johns Hopkins, he said, from my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any dinosaur species. Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is empty. So here's a guy that looked at more dinosaurs than probably anybody, and he says there's nothing. They just show up in these rock layers, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. So myth busting number one, this is a velociraptor found in Poland, or by Polish scientists in Mongolia. This is Velociraptor and a Protoceratops in mortal combat. So he's about to bite down, and all he had was a strong bite to fight back with. And he bit back, and they were buried instantly before he could complete the bite. That's how quickly these dinosaurs were buried. It's like Hulk Hogan in the ring, putting somebody in a hole and buried instantly, locked in that position for thousands of years. So they dug these up, and it's called a life assembly. It's a pretty amazing discovery. One of the most amazing discoveries, I think, of dinosaurs. But nonetheless, the facts are this. There are no known ancestors to any dinosaur group, and it's even admitted by the evolutionists. And all fossils appear in rocks without ancestors, as I said. Everything just suddenly shows up as they were buried, as the water went higher and higher. That progressive flood explains the reason why we see differences in the fossil record. So let's look at dinosaurs evolving into birds. Did they really evolve into birds? And so did you actually have, this is kind of a rendition they show, kind of like the apes turn into humans, but this is not true at all in terms of the order. When you look at the rocks, we'll see that this thing over here comes back over about here. And so you have birds way back here in the middle of all the dinosaurs. So it didn't evolve. There's no evidence of evolution in the rocks, as we'll see. So, but did some dinosaurs even have feathers? That's what scientists are saying. There's even some creation scientists saying dinosaurs had feathers. But did they really have feathers? So we'll look at that a little bit as well. This is a true bird, Archaeopteryx. This was found in Jurassic rocks. In the middle of the dinosaur rock layers, we find this bird, fully formed bird. They could fly. They've done studies on this bird, and it kind of flew like a pheasant. So it couldn't fly great distances, couldn't fly really well. And that's probably why it got caught in the flood earlier than most birds. There's a lot of birds later, but this is one of the earliest birds found in the rock record. So those are real feathers. You can kind of see the edge of the hair, but it had a little skinny, bony tail, and it had claws in its wings and a little bit of teeth in its mouth. So some unusual things. And this is a species of birds that's extinct today, but they found other species similar to this called Microraptor in China. It's not just in Germany where they find these Archaeopteryx. But they're not transitional fossils at all. This is a fully flying bird. But scientists are trying to say animals like this had proto-feathers. These are feathers that are supposed to be, in the process of evolving from scales to feathers. And that's what you see. See, it kind of looks like hair on the back of this thing. See these little wispy hair-like structures? Steve Bruce said, an evolutionist said this, the bones of these species are covered with a thick, feathery fluff, not quill pen feathers. So he admits they're not feathers, but simpler filament-like feathers that look like hair. What they call these proto-feathers. Well, they're probably not even proto-feathers at all. They're nothing like feathers, not even hair probably. What they probably are is collagen fibers that were squished when the animal was buried so quickly, the collagen from the skin and the scaly skin seeped out and melt these things. So what happened? Again, some empirical science done by Alan Fiducia, who's an evolutionary bird paleontologist, in 2005, but he's ignored because he goes against the mainstream. He demonstrated by squishing a dolphin, which has not a lot of hair, a little hair, but not a lot. When he squished it, you got all these fibers that look like hair coming off. And so that's the collagen in the skin. So that's probably what you're looking at when you look at these dinosaurs like this. You're probably just seeing, well, that's the wrong one. This one, you're probably seeing these hair coming off is probably just collagen in the skin. And he's at least doing science. He's at least doing empirical experiments. The rest of the paleontology world just, no, those are proto-feathers, without studying them at all. Because they believe so much in what they say and in their theory, they're really doing what's called verification science. They're just verifying what they think they already know. And unfortunately, it's not empirical science the way science should be done. So at ICR, we try to do empirical science with our blind cavefish. We gather data. In geology, we look at real rock data and plot that up. We're not just making up stories. But unfortunately, they have the microphone, so they say whatever they want. And it's not based in much science at all. So most evidence also comes from, in the last 20 years, comes from one location in China, which should worry you. Because the Chinese have lots and lots of frauds. They did a study of their marine fossils, I guess they're marine specimens in their museums. They found 80% of them were fake in their own museums. And so I don't really trust the Chinese at all. There's lots of things coming out that are fake. But some of the things are real. So this is a bird called Microraptor, which a lot of people try to say is a dinosaur. But it actually looks almost like an Archaeopteryx in a lot of ways. It has feathers on its back legs, just like Archaeopteryx. But there's also frauds that come out. This was a fraud. Archaeoraptor. Some of you might remember this in 1999, National Geographic put out. Some of you weren't even born in 1999. But in 1999, they put out this issue, and they put an hour-long TV show on I watched. Because they're supposed to have found a bird-dinosaur transition, half bird, half dinosaur. And they went through all this commotion. And even before it went to press, they were told, something's not right here. But they published it anyway. And basically, something wasn't right for sure, because it was a half of a bird glued to a half of a dinosaur. So in black, you see the dinosaur. In red, you see the bird species. But it was glued together. It was obvious when they did a CT scan. But all these scientists all over the world that studied this and looked at it all just saw what they wanted to see. They hear what their itching ears want to hear. And so they believed this was real. This was a transitional fossil, they believed. But the whole thing was just a hoax. And there's a couple of more of those I don't have time to explain. But in that new book that's coming out eventually, there's a little bit more of a few more hoaxes where they thought they saw a really small dinosaur. It was just a lizard. It wasn't a dinosaur at all. There's a few other things they do. Anyway, there are no feathered dinosaurs. I don't really think there's any because even T-Rex in 2017 was shown to, without question, T-Rex had scaly skin. And this, of course, the paleontologists are still lamenting this, that they have to admit that T-Rex has scaly skin. This is T-Rex skin print right here. And there's hundreds of skin imprints that are all over. The Glendive Museum has some. You can see skin imprints of almost every dinosaur type. But this is what T-Rex skin looked like. They found there's some T-Rex bones. So dinosaurs, there's no evidence they had feathers. Things like Microraptor and Archaeopteryx are better shown to be birds, not dinosaurs at all. Birds need to preen their feathers if you have feathers. 9% of the day, according to biology studies, they spend their time preening their feathers so it's like combing their hair. If your feathers are all in tatters, you can't fly. You can't swim if you're a penguin. Even penguins preen their feathers. This is from the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs. Some of you might have been down there, if you get down there. But visiting my daughter, my grandson. So here they are preening their feathers, but how did theropods preen their feathers? How did these meat-eating dinosaurs that became meat-eaters after the fall, how do they preen feathers with jaws like a T-Rex? Or jaws like an allosaur? Or jaws like a velociraptor? Yet all you see in the movies is animals like velociraptors jumping in icy cold water, swimming under the water with their feathers and coming out. That's the latest movie. It's just, no, that's not the case at all. You can't have feathers if you don't have a beak that can preen the feathers. And birds don't walk like dinosaurs. This is one of those snowstorms that hits Dallas. The snow's that deep. Shuts down the entire city for days. This much snow. The one thing Texans are afraid of, cold weather. Scares them half to death. You mention cold and they leave. Right, Joel? Even Emily Steele would agree with that. All right, she's listening in. Joel's colleague. Dinosaurs don't walk, they hop along because they balance on their knees. They have their legs, their femurs are always out front. And they're balancing on their knees and ankles. They don't swing their femurs back and forth, their thigh bones like dinosaurs. They don't balance on the hips like you and I do. They walk completely different. Here's some dinosaur footprints. Joel took this picture up in Colorado, up in Dinosaur Ridge near Denver. Here's a four-legged dinosaur, back leg, front leg, of these duck-billed dinosaurs, like a hadrosaur type thing. And then here's a two-legged dinosaur, a bipedal dinosaur, right, left, walk along. You see, they're very close together because they walk upright. But dinosaurs have open holes in the hips. I mentioned this earlier. They have an open acetabulum, it's called. All these biology terms I had to learn when I was working on that book. So they have open holes, no matter whether they have lizard hips or bird hips, the two types of hips dinosaurs have. And ironically enough, the ones that are supposedly most bird-like have lizard hips. It's completely opposite what they should have. But nonetheless, birds don't have open holes in their hip side. Here's some birds where you can pull the femurs off. You go home and cook a chicken, pull the bones off, and you can see they're not open holes, they're sockets. Even Microraptor and Archaeopteryx have at least partially closed acetabulums or holes in their hips. But almost all dinosaurs, except for some of the ankylosaurs, those little tanks, had open holes in the hips. Birds don't operate like that. Birds balance on the knees, like I mentioned. Here's their femur back here. And here they're balanced on their knees. That's the center of balance of this thing is the knee and then the ankle. Not way back here. That's what dinosaurs walk back here. They're balancing, they're swinging their hips. Notice all these bones sticking down off the tail. The Microraptor and Archaeopteryx have a little thin bony tail. There's none of these processes or chevrons coming down. These attach to muscles to the femur up here. So when they walk, the tail will swing back and forth. And there's a muscle attachment site on the femur on dinosaurs, but not on birds, called a fourth trochanter. You can see the attachment site because the muscles were attached to the tail. Whereas birds, those Microraptor, they're just thin, bony tails. There's no attachment sites. And their femurs are smooth. They don't have a muscle attachment site because birds look like this. The femurs are inside. They're swinging their knees around and their ankles, and that's how they walk kind of funny. Completely different, but that's ignored by the paleontological community. They don't look at the back, hips, and legs. That tells you what a bird is and what a bird isn't. So the biggest problem, of course, also is, as I mentioned earlier, this doesn't work because you find birds down here in Jurassic rocks well before the so-called bird-like dinosaurs like Deinonychus and Velociraptor, which are found up here in Cretaceous rocks. So it's about, in their worldview, 50 or 70 million years of time, when you have birds down here, and then the bird-like animals are up here. So why do you already have birds if they're supposed to evolve? That's like having the grandparents born after the grandchild. That's hard to do. So you try that at home. Go ahead, try that at home. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work when you look at the rocks either. Again, the rocks don't lie. People do. So here what they do, and this is what I had to show my students when I taught at a public school. I put a DVD in and show them this. Guy would draw a line like this and say, well, here's the bird-like dinosaurs up here, and here's the birds down here that we already know existed. So we know there's an ancestor to both, which we'll call an unknown ancestor. And they draw a line down to from the dinosaurs that are kind of bird-like down to here. And then they draw another line from the birds down to here and say, oh, look, that solves our problem. By drawing a couple of dashed lines down below it, making up an unknown ancestor, we solve the issue that there's an ancestor down here to both. But dashed lines mean you're making it up, and they're making this up. There's absolutely no fossil evidence to support this whatsoever. It remains unknown. It's been unknown now for 20, 30 years because it's never going to be found. I will make a prediction. You'll never find the ancestry to both birds and dinosaurs in rocks below birds and dinosaurs. And they never have. Gunter Weil, another evolutionary paleontologist, said the dinosaurs in China are not the ancestors of birds. They can't be because they're later in the rocks than Archaeopteryx. There must have been older dinosaurs with feathers because they know, yet we haven't found any evidence for them, unfortunately. So again, there's no unknown ancestor, but that's what they have to do. They have to make stories up, dash lines, to keep their story going. They have no ancestors to dinosaurs. They have no ancestors to birds. So they try to put them together. So myth busting 2, the facts show dinosaurs did not evolve into birds. Yeah, you guys see this in your backyard ever? I hope not. Birds are buried in rocks before the bird-like dinosaurs. And then some bird-like dinosaurs were just out-and-out hoaxes. And there's several of those hoaxes out there. Let's move on to point 3, that dinosaurs are supposed to be millions and millions of years old. We talked about this a little yesterday at the end of my talk, and that goes back to the dinosaur soft parts and tissues that we're finding. But not just in dinosaurs, in other things that are supposed to go down in the rock record 500 million years. Original proteins are still there. How can that be? Now, if you were studying biology and somebody told you they found proteins, collagen in rocks, millions and millions of years old, you would have said, that's crazy. Nobody would have believed it because they can't survive that long because they've done studies showing these things can't last that long, especially here in North Dakota. It's cold up here in the wintertime. It gets hot in the summertime. It gets 100 degrees in the summer sometimes and 50 below in the winter. And you got rocks and fossils laying near the surface, and you're inside those bones are still finding original proteins. It's amazing they can last that long, from the time of the flood 4,400 years ago, let alone millions and millions of years. But soft tissue is there. Physical chemists have shown that even collagen, one of the most durable proteins, can't last more than a few 100,000 years. Can't last even 1 million years. And there's been, as I mentioned, over 120 papers in the secular journals, not the creationist journals. People say, oh, those creationist journals? No. 120 secular journals have found these different critters. So myth busting 3, the facts show that we're finding in the rocks that the earth is young. These original proteins imply strongly, very compellingly, it's hard to prove things with historical science, but as strong as evidence as you can find, and we keep adding up more and more and more of this, indicating that dinosaurs and all fossils are young. It's not a problem for creation scientists, but it creates a big problem for the evolutionists. They need time for all their crazy random mutations to occur. But we're finding they're not random. There's just non-random adaptation that God has designed in the animal. Because the animal can adapt to these environmental changes, just like humans adapt to climate changes. We'll talk about the Ice Age after lunch today. And the Egyptians built their civilization not in a desert. The Anasazi tribes that lived in Grand Canyon didn't probably go there because it was a desert. It was originally well watered after the flood for a long, long time. But they had to adapt as the water got more and more scarce, rain coming down less and less. They had to adapt just like animals adapt. They can adapt to the desert climates because God built that inside the animal. It's not nature forcing it. So, moving on to our last and final point. This is kind of the most exciting one. This is a new one, so even Mike Mueller has not heard this before. And Kevin. Dinosaurs are supposed to have gone extinct from an asteroid. That's what you hear, right? Chicxulub impact site. Well, watch carefully. This is actual footage that actually occurs. We filmed this from outer space 66 million years ago. This is filmed from the 66 million year old space station. So here it's coming in. There's the impact. And those waves went all the way to North Dakota. That's what they say. There was tsunami waves coming in from the flood that went all the way to North Dakota. They weren't tied to this impact. Well, let's look at the evidence for this impact. We'll watch that again because that's just kind of fun. Let's see that again. This is not real footage. I was kidding earlier. This is just computer recreation of all this. Don't believe everything I say. I had students that would believe anything I said, which scares me. Because people believe anything they hear if you hear it enough times, and that's what evolutionists have been doing for over 150 years now, lying to people for 150 years. Well, here's the Chicxulub crater, and I put quotes around crater because there is no physical crater there. There is no physical crater. This is just a gravity map. This is based on differences in gravity of the rocks. So it's like putting your hand, you can feel the heat, but there's no physical thing there. It's just the density of the rocks are different. It kind of gives a circular shape, but there's no physical crater. They talk about this crater all the time. Oh, there's a crater. Where's the crater? It's only a gravity map. Gravity is just, geophysical hocus pocus. It can be interpreted in many different ways. You've got a basement high coming in here, a big uplift coming in this way. You've got a low, a kind of a collapsed rock right through here that runs across through here. This doesn't really even exist, but there is a little bit of a low that runs across, kind of north-south across the basin. But the two of these together, I think, kind of gives you that semicircular shape. But the first thing you need to keep in mind is there is no crater. But they need this because they have no other answer to why dinosaurs disappeared. The flood is out. Remember, that's the first thing they took off the table back in the 19th century. Early, there's no flood, so they had to make up their own story to explain everything. They had to make up stories of ancestors, make up stories of extinctions. But the extinctions are really just levels of the flood where you destroy an entire ecosystem globally at the same time. So all the dinosaurs are finally destroyed, and then the water went higher to the next level. But what we really see at Chicxulub, and I look at all these wells when I studied my research going across North America. Here's the Yucatan Peninsula coming up here. There's all these wells. They drilled a new one offshore to convince themselves they were correct, but they were wrong. But here's the crater supposed to be about here, a little bit onshore, a little bit offshore. And when you look at the wells, this is the rocks in the wells. The blue is limestone. Oops, I went too fast. The blue is limestone. I'll get there. How did I miss that one? Did I lose one? It was there a minute ago. Here we go. It's coming up. When you're supposed to have an impact, you're supposed to have a lot of melt. It's as big as they say. It's supposed to be like a 6-mile wide asteroid that hit and made about 300 or 100-mile wide impact, or bigger than that. But there should be a lot of melt if it hits. So when you look at the wells, these are the wells. I got ahead of myself. That's why I don't like presenter view. I think I'm on the wrong page. Here we are. The blue is limestone. This yellow is sand. This red is melt, rocks that actually came from a molten state. So if you have a big impact, there should be a lot of melt. They predicted about 3 to 4 kilometers of melt, which is about 2.5 miles of melt. 2.5 miles of rock should be melted, or should have melted and then solidified again. When you drill all these wells into the crater all around here, all you find is at the most about 1,000 feet of melt in one well. This one over here, I think, had about 100 feet of melt. That's it. So where's the 2.5 miles of melt that should be there from a big impact hitting? It's not there. So there's not nearly enough melt. If you look at the seismic across there, here's the gravity map again, which gives you the somewhat circular figure. This is what they're basing it on. If they drilled this well offshore, they drilled into here, they drilled into this, they hit basement, they drilled down hundreds of feet of granite because all they drilled into was an uplift like this. This is toward the crater center over here. So there's a little bit of a depression, but that runs north-south through what they call the crater. But there's really no crater there. So they drilled through here, they hit a bunch of basement. They try to say they hit this peak ring that splattered out, like when water hits a mud puddle, you see it splatter out. But they didn't hit any peak ring at all. Here's the seismic data that shows they just hit basement. It just keeps drilling. But they claimed in a science article they proved the impact. How do you prove anything in a historical science? But they didn't prove it. They just hit basement, which is what the seismic really shows. It's really a shame what bad science is being done and put out there by the secular community. As long as it fits their story, they can say whatever they want. My second question is, not only is there no melt, or very little melt, rocks that melted from the heat of the impact. But where's the iridium? Iridium is this rare earth element that's supposed to be produced by impacts. Meteorites are rich in iridium. They come in and they hit and they spread this dust cloud of iridium all over the world. And you're told that this stuff's everywhere at the KPG boundary or up at the Cretaceous. KT boundary used to be called. But you go to Montana and places, you see it in one hill and it's not in the next hill. So it's not everywhere. It's in a few locations. But iridium is produced by volcanoes. They've documented a lot of Indonesian volcanoes produce, tons and tons of iridium. So there's iridium coming out of volcanoes all the time. You guys have iridium in the rocks around here. And it's above and below the KPG boundary. It's not just at the KPG boundary at the end of the Cretaceous. But we looked at the wells. You guys are reading ahead of me. They only found traces of iridium in 3 of the wells out of 10. So if this is the smoking gun for this big asteroid that hit the Earth and wiped out all the dinosaurs globally, where's the smoke? Did it just go everywhere else? I heard one guy say that. Well, it just went everywhere else. I'm like, this makes no sense. You should have a lot of iridium really close to the source and less as you go out. But it's not even everywhere. And it's split through the rocks. There's iridium all over the rocks. In your rocks out here at this beautiful national park, you've got all sorts of ash and tough volcanic debris from the volcanoes that carried great distances. You've got iridium, I'm sure, in here, if you study for it. But there's not enough iridium. There's not enough melt, not enough iridium. So I wrote a paper on this. I published it about 2017. It's been a while. And I didn't even emphasize that there's no crater there, no physical crater there. But I talked about how there's not enough iridium. And at the time, they didn't find iridium in that 3rd new well, so I only said 2. But nonetheless, there's not enough melt and not enough iridium. So myth-busting 4, the facts show there's likely no asteroid at all, if any asteroid, especially at that site. So how did the dinosaurs go extinct? They're extinct today, we're pretty sure. How did they go extinct? If they were on the ark and they got off the ark, how did they go extinct? If there's not enough melt, no iridium, like you just drilled into this semicircular gravity anomaly. So let's look at how they went extinct. I think, here's my speculation, partly because of climate differences from the pre-flood to the post-flood. The world that then was destroyed. And the climate and the environment in the pre-flood world was destroyed. There was likely more oxygen because we see big dragonflies like this in the fossil record. They need more oxygen to get that big. There's likely more CO2. It might have been almost a global greenhouse. Even the evolutionists believe that the time of the dinosaurs was a global greenhouse. And now afterwards, of course, you've got only the area around the equator that's really warm. Where do cold-blooded animals live today mostly? You don't have crocodiles in your rivers here in Montana and North Dakota, do you? They're not even in Texas, except way down south. There's occasionally some get up in North Texas, but not very often because it's too cold even there. But there's a big change. So human interaction probably played a role also. Humans are now not living in separate areas like I believe in the pre-flood world. They're now living in same areas. Dinosaurs are competing with humans for the same location, same resources. And so humans are probably killing off some of the dinosaurs. And we see evidence of that in St. George and the Dragon. We hear about these legends of dinosaurs killing dragons. These dragons are probably dinosaurs that were existing after the flood. And so there's some truth to some of these legends, as they say. There's also a lot of ancient texts, like in the book of Job. We'll talk about Behemoth, we'll talk about here in a minute. And the Leviathan, pictographs, petroglyphs, carvings, artwork. We have a whole wall in our Discovery Center about the size of the whale, not quite this big, but about half the size of this. This shows a lot of artifacts. But Vance Nelson, I think his name is Vance Nelson, he wrote a huge book on that. Went all around the world, took a lot of pictures, and it's got some amazing discoveries. And if you look at those pictures, you'll see that the legs are coming straight down. Nobody knew the legs were coming straight down until 1841. There's no reptile today, the legs come straight down, so how do they know to draw the legs coming straight down? We'll see some of these in a minute. But let's look at the Bible. Behemoth, behold now Behemoth, which I made with you, eats grass like an ox. His strength is in his loins, the force in the muscles of his belly. He moves his tail like a cedar. Again, dinosaur tails were tied to their legs, and so they swing back and forth as they walk like a cedar tree, kind of horizontal cedar tree, just kind of swaying. His bones are like bars of iron, really strong legs. And I can go into the details of this a little later, but it says he eats grass like an ox. Evolutionists scoffed at that for hundreds of years. And then in 2005, they found dinosaur dung, just like you can see horse dung. You can see what the horse ate. They found fossilized dinosaur dung with these long-necked dinosaurs like this picture, and they found it ate 5 species of grass. But there's no fossil grass at that level. Grass doesn't appear in the fossils until later. But that proved that dinosaurs were, in fact, especially these long-necked ones, with a tail like a cedar, was eating grass. The Bible was right all along. Why do we doubt the Bible? We should never doubt God's word. That's the only truth we have. I ask my college students, and I teach a class once a year face-to-face, what's truth? What truth do we have in the world? And they're like, science. I'm like, no, the Bible. Only God's word. He's revealed truth to us. We can trust every word in the Bible. Man's science, you can't trust. The rocks are real, the fossils are real, but their interpretations are just man's philosophy. But the Bible is true. God gave it to us and he kept it true. Here's some ancient artwork. This is the Narmer palette. You can see these long-necked animals. The Egyptians have ropes around their necks, and you can see the legs are coming straight down. Here's a cylinder from Mesopotamia. You can see they roll it out. You can see long-necked animals, long tails, legs coming straight down. Here's from the Carlisle Cathedral. Our own Dave Napier went and took a picture of this. He got the guy to roll the thing back. Didn't tell me he's a creationist. But he said those crazy creationists think these are dinosaurs. But he took a picture of this little inlay that's been stepped on for many years. You can see legs coming straight down, long-necked animals. This is in 1596 or 1496. So somebody must have saw dinosaurs or something similar even to that late in time. And this is the one that we show the whole replica of the column in our Discovery Center. There's animals like a lion and a lizard and a water buffalo, and then there's this with the splayed out with the legs coming straight down, just like a stegosaur. How did they know the legs come straight down unless they saw them? So to me, it's pretty compelling that there's a lot of evidence that dinosaurs did live for centuries after thousands of years even after the flood. But they finally went extinct, I believe, because humans were probably helping them out. But they only had a narrow range where you could live, especially with the Ice Age we'll talk about this afternoon coming on. That even pushed them a little bit tighter towards the equator. So if you're a cold-blooded animal and there's an Ice Age going on, the whole world is colder, you got to move closer to where it's warmer. So they had very narrow locations where they could live. But they did exist for, it appears, thousands of years, at least some of them, after the flood. But I think they're extinct today. Pretty sure. Maybe. Probably. All right, leave it at that. So let's summarize 4 evolutionary myths busted. Number 1, dinosaurs did not have ancestral forms. There is no ancestral forms in the fossil record for anything. Everything just shows up suddenly, fully formed, ready to go, because that's how they were buried in the flood. It's just different environments buried at different elevations. Dinosaurs did not evolve into birds, even though that's the common lie that's spread out there today. There's no evidence that they did. We have birds before these so-called bird-like dinosaurs in the rock record. In fact, in their worldview, millions of years before. So how can you evolve these things, over and over and over, and there's no evidence of an unknown ancestor that they have to postulate? It makes no sense. And third, dinosaur fossils are only about 4,500 years old, 4,400 years old when the flood happened. The evidence in the original tissues and the proteins show that these fossils are young. And fourth and finally, dinosaurs went extinct after the flood. God brought dinosaurs to the ark. They got off the ark with Noah opened the doors, and God said, you can let everybody out. There's enough grasses out there to eat now. 371 days later, they got off the ark, and then the dinosaurs got off with them. And they survived for a while, at least according to the Bible, in the book of Job, and other texts. People saw dragons in China. Marco Polo wrote about dragons. There's a lot of evidence out there, and it's just ignored by the evolutionary community because they don't want to believe it. But there's really a lot of myths that are being taught about dinosaurs. So at ICR, we're trying to set that story straight. In one of the books I wrote when I first came to ICR almost 10 years ago, now 9 years ago, I wrote this book. We've updated a few things in it over the years. And this was a comprehensive book that covers a lot of what I said today, even about the birds' ancestry, the story about that's not true, and about the feathers, lack of feathers on dinosaurs, some of that's in here as well. So this is a very comprehensive book. Some people say, and I don't want to brag, some people say this is still the best creation book on dinosaurs out there. It ties it to the Bible. But it is a really good book, and we have them back there. Joel will willingly sell you 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. And I'll even sign them for you if you want. And then my wife and I wrote a series of 3 books on the Henry, the little duck-billed dinosaur here. This is Henry, and these are his sisters, because his sisters have eyelashes. Those have never been found in the fossil record, but apparently the girl dinosaurs had eyelashes. But in reality, it's the boys that have the bigger eyelashes. All right? Guys always have better eyelashes. You ladies have to enhance yours with some makeup. So maybe we should do the other way around. Anyway, this is his mom. He gets born, and of course, there's a big plan for Henry that's in the second story continues it. And there's a third story that's in our warehouse. It's about to go on sale. We've already produced them. But Henry in the Ice Age. And so I kind of ruined the first story maybe. But he's born, and God has a plan for him just like he has a plan for you. And so we also have the DVD. Some of those videos I showed last night came from this DVD set. It's a 4-part DVD series on dinosaurs. The third DVD of this is actually all about the soft tissues. And we spent a lot of money making this video, really well done. All those animations a lot of them are in here. And I think Joel will sell you these as well. If you don't have a DVD player, you can go to our website, icr.org, and you can do a digital download of a lot of these things. And then finally, there's that book I told you about last night that you still haven't bought enough of. These are what you need to send off your kids to college or get your kids through junior high. Because at junior high, Dr. G talks about 40% of the junior high kids are already doubting the truth of the Bible. And a lot of it's because of the science they're learning in their schools. They're learning a contrary story to what they're, even if you're homeschooled, your kids may eventually go off to college and get exposed to all these evolutionary stories. You've got to send them a little bit equipped. And this covers a little bit of everything. And it is, again, probably the best bargain of anything we sell, with a lot of new chapters. And then, if nothing else, please make sure you've signed up for Acts and Facts, because that's free. It'll come to your mailbox every other month. You can get it digitally. You can sign up digitally if you want. But it's a wonderful resource to kind of keep you informed of the latest research that Dr. G and his gang are doing and what I'm doing. But we're really trying to fundamentally change the way science is done. Dr. G is really pushing. I think he's on the right track. I remember the moment he convinced me that I was wrong by believing in natural selection. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan over lunch. And so you might remember when you first heard his explanation here. Maybe this was your moment earlier today when you realized that natural selection doesn't work. There's no such thing as natural selection. It's all the way God designed the animal. It's all internal. It's not external at all. But anyway, you can read more about that, our latest discoveries in Acts and Facts. And I know many of you probably already get this. Who gets this already? Why do you already get this? So you can vouch for it. It's a pretty good resource, isn't it? All right. So the rest of you that don't get it, you should. It's free. You can sign up in the back for that too. So we have things you can buy and things that are free. Well, with that, I'll quit and let you guys go to lunch. It's lunchtime, so we'll see you after lunch. I'll be talking about the Ice Age, and Dr. G will be talking about more biology, engineered biology? Okay, more engineered biology, because you can't get enough. All right, thank you very much.